Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be doing the mid-year freak out book tag. So we are halfway through the year, just about, and it is time to do a little bit of a check-in on how I am doing on my reading goals and how I feel about some of the things that I've already read this year. And I found this tag online and I thought it looked like a really good way to do it. I think there are 13 questions. So I read 62 books so far this year. My original goal was 75, which was definitely a little bit low because last year I read 104 books and I think that I didn't read it all in the summer last year because we bought a house. So probably I was setting myself a goal that I knew I could do, but that was clearly too low. So I did go ahead and bump it up to 100. This goes in with the first question, which is the best book you've read so far in 2024. So out of those 62 books, I have 16 5-star reads. And I know that might seem like a lot, but I am someone who gives a 5-star if either I finish it and it is just like blown my mind. Like, you know, that's just that 5-star feeling. There's a 5-star feeling and I don't know how to explain it, but it's just a thing. Or if it's a book that was super close, but not perfect, but then after I finished it, I could not stop thinking about it. I will go back and bump it up to a 5-star. I rarely take something off of 5-star, but I occasionally do that too. So the first book that I'm going to talk about, I have two for best books that I've read this year, that's just pretty good for me, narrowing it down. The first one was a book that I originally gave 4.5 stars, but I cannot stop thinking about it. I cannot shut up talking about it. And that book is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. So The Spear Cuts Through Water is the story of two men who are traveling with a god to stop the end of the world. So that's a pretty almost standard kind of fantasy trope beginning to a book, but this book is so cool. It has a structure that is unlike anything I've ever seen. It is told through the POV of almost every person that you meet. They'll get their little line of dialogue where they talk about their backstory or some frustration they have going on in their life. It's also a story that is told within a play in this mystical playhouse. And it is really unlike anything I've ever read. I really feel like it is a book that I would consider to be an accomplishment. And I know it's one that I'm going to be thinking about forever. I don't own a copy of it because I really would like to buy a copy of the hardcover, but it's completely sold out everywhere. I think this book sold a lot more copies than anticipated. And I can't find it anywhere for anything that I would consider to be a reasonable price. So I'm going to keep looking for it in thrift stores and used bookstores and things like that. But if I don't find it, I'm just going to buy the paperback, but I haven't broken down yet. So I don't own it yet, but I also love the cover. I think the cover is so beautiful with all the blues and the greens and just one of the prettiest covers from this year too. So I'm going to give my standard warning that I give when I talk about this book, which is that you need to not read it on audiobook. This book does not translate to audiobook, and I can say that because I tried to listen to the audiobook and I had no idea what was going on. Do not listen to the audiobook. Read it on your Kindle or your e-reader. Read it in a physical form, which is what I did and I would recommend, because the formatting of the book makes it very clear when the POV changes. And with listening to the audiobook, so confusing. It's a little confusing anyway, but the audiobook, real confusing. Don't do that. And then the second book that I have for Best Book of the Year is Northwoods by Daniel Mason. This is the story of a house and a piece of land over the past 400 or so years, and all the people that lived on it, the animals that lived on it, the things that happened there, the people that died, the people that died and then kind of came back as ghosts to be in the next story. It's a really great book, and it's unlike anything else I've ever read before. Every chapter is its own story as we move through the story of these people who have lived on this land. And in between the chapters, there are kind of these interludes, which might be case notes or a play or a song or some photographs that go along with the story that Daniel Mason is trying to tell. And I just thought that it was so fantastic. I loved it. It would be great for book clubs. I did it as a read along, which was really great because we could read a chapter and then talk about it, because each chapter is kind of its own little self-contained story. And I don't think enough people are reading this book, and I think that you need to read this book. So that's my second pick for best book that I've read this year. The second question is best sequel that you have read this year. And I, again, narrowed it down to two. Pretty good. I read a lot of series. So the first one is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands, which I have right here. This is the sequel to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. And I actually think it was even better than the first book. I thought that the romance was even more charming. I thought the fae were even scarier. I thought there was a cat, which definitely made it better than the first book. Did love the dog in the first book, but always like the addition of a cat. And I'm looking forward so much to the third book. This is a really great series. I recommend it. It's kind of a romantasy, but I wouldn't say that it's exactly a romantasy. I would recommend it for fans of Howl's Moving Castle because that is the thing that I found it to be the most similar to. But this is a great book, and I would definitely recommend that one. And then the other amazing sequel that I read was Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, which is the second book in the Stormlight Archive. I had previously read this book as well as the first book in the series, The Way of Kings. And the first time that I read it, I don't know that I appreciated it as much as I did the second time. I thought that it took everything that happened in the first book and all the characters and settings that were established, and it just really bumped it up for me to that next level. I was just captivated the whole time, even though it was 1,100 pages long. It never felt slow, which is more than I can say, to be honest, for the third book in the series, which I just finished, Oathbringer, which did feel slow to me, and I didn't think was paced as well as Words of Radiance. So Words of Radiance so far is my favorite book within the Stormlight Archive, and I'm really glad that I read it for a second time and got a lot of new things out of it. Okay, the third question is new release you haven't read yet but want to. So I am super good at reading new releases. I am always clicking that notify me tag on Libby so that the library tells me as soon as they add a copy that I can try to reserve. So generally speaking, I tend to read all of the new releases that I would like to read. There are occasionally ones that I don't get to, quite right at the beginning, but I'm pretty good at that. So I had to kind of look through my books to figure out what is something that has already come out, because I obviously have a bunch of stuff that's coming out in the second half of the year that I want to read, that I would like to read that's already come out. And what I picked was Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books. So I haven't seen anything online about this one. It is by the author of The Change. Her name is Kirsten Miller. The Change is a book about women who gain magical powers when they go through menopause, which is quite a choice. I did read that one and I gave it 4.5 stars because I just thought it was really good. So this one is about a woman in a southern town who sets up a little library in her yard of books that she would consider to be kind of like the approved reading list. And someone apparently goes in and makes some changes to that little library that she doesn't know about. And it's about the people in this small town. I'm expecting it to be kind of a little bit of a love letter to the power of books in our lives. I think it sounds really charming. I do like the author. The library tried to give it to me this month and I was like, you know what, I do not have time for that. But at some point this year, I definitely would like to get to reading this book. So if you have already read it and you think it's worth it, please let me know. All right, most anticipated release in the second half of the year. There's not really a question of this one, right? It's definitely going to be Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, which is the 5th book in the Stormlight Archive and the final book in this era of Stormlight Archive. So I still have to read Rhythm of War, which is the 4th book in the series, which I will read at some point before this book comes out in December. But when this book comes out in December, I will be dropping everything to read it. As soon as the library has a copy, I will be reserving it. If I don't go ahead and buy it, because as much as I like to have physical books, I am not going to be reading a 1,200 page book in physical form. That's not happening. This is definitely a Kindle book for me. All right, question number 5 is biggest disappointment. And for me, I think it's going to be The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. So this book was so hyped up by BookTube for me that I was thinking it was going to be the start of a new 5-star fantasy series. And I was so deeply disappointed by it. I thought it was going to be a mystery set in a world that really values the law over everything else. And I kind of got that, but also kind of not. The mystery was sort of weak, I felt like. And my biggest problem was that the main character, her name is Helena. She is the law clerk of the judge that we are following throughout this series. And I thought that she suffered from female character that was written by a man, kind of worse than any other thing that I've read this year. I mean, she was written so immaturely and so silly and so just, I just did not buy her character whatsoever. The story was also very dark. And I have since learned that I do not like particularly grim, dark fantasy, which I think this would fall into. And it just really did not work for me. I will not be continuing the series. This was one of my least favorite things that I read this year, and it was a huge disappointment. All right, question number 6 is biggest surprise. And my biggest surprise of the year actually happened when I read A Blind Date with a Book. So my library did Blind Date with a Book, and I picked up one, and the book that I got was Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Moore. And I am obsessed with this series. I had heard about it, but I was probably not ever gonna get around to reading it because it sounded weird. And a lot of people said it was really confusing. But I felt compelled because I got it in the package, and I absolutely loved this book. I loved everything about the world. I loved Gideon. Gideon is one of my favorite characters just ever. I thought she was hilarious, and I understand a lot of people did not care for the humor in this book, and it is a little bit juvenile, but which isn't usually my thing. But somehow it really, really worked for me. I never found the first book to be super confusing. It has kind of a locked room mystery aspect to it, which of course I always really enjoy. And I love this world where we have all these necromancers doing all these different things. It was so dark in just this way that I had never experienced. So that was my biggest surprise of the year and one of my favorite books that I've read this year. All right, favorite new author is question number 7. And my pick for this is going to be Rachel Gillig, who wrote One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. I had really low expectations going into this series. I had seen a lot of people say that they felt like it read very young adult, that it just wasn't very deep. But then I'd seen other people who were like, no, this is my favorite romantasy ever. So I decided to go ahead and find out for myself, and it was fantastic. I loved everything about the dark world. I loved the romance, where I felt like the characters were very respectful of one another in both the first and second books. And I just am ready to read basically anything that this author writes, because I was so surprised, and I love these books so much, and I think she's got so much promise. Question number 8 is newest fictional crush. Am I too old to have fictional crushes? Probably yes, but I'm gonna give you one anyway. And that one is going to be Wendell from the Emily Wilde books. He's just like the biggest golden retriever of a man, and he is so obsessed in the best possible way with Emily. I mean, he's like the perfect man. He sews, he loves to clean, he loves cats, like, right? He's like the perfect guy is what I'm saying. And I just love him and his relationship with Emily. And speaking as a lady who can sometimes, I think, be kind of a grumpy person, it is so nice to see a character totally be charmed by crankiness. So that's a good one. Number 9 is newest favorite character, and mine is going to be Uncharles from Service Model by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I haven't done a full review of this book yet. I'm gonna do it in my end of the month wrap up that I haven't filmed yet, but Uncharles is a robot who, for plot reasons, finds himself unemployed. His entire purpose of being is to be a valet for fancy rich humans, and all of a sudden he is unemployed. He can't find someone else to do that job for, and the question is, what is his purpose in life then? I really love robots in books, especially robots who are trying to break free of their programming. Uncharles is not so much trying to break free of his programming as he is trying to cling to his programming as hard as he possibly can. He's very charming. His internal thoughts are very funny. I really love this book, but I don't know. I love a robot character, and this is my newest favorite. So Uncharles, also that name has reasons. Read the book. It's worth it. All right, number 10 is books that made you cry. So I am someone who cries at books for every reason, whether they make me happy or they make me sad or anything in between. So this is a hard one to narrow down, but I decided to go with probably the saddest book that I have read this year, and that book is In Memoriam by Alice Wynne. It starts out in a boys' school, a boarding school, and all of these boys are talking about the war and they're talking about joining up, and we see how innocent they are of everything that they are going to be expected to do and everything that's going to happen to them within the war. And we do eventually see them go to war. We are inside the trenches with them, which is very devastating. It's one of the best depictions of that I've seen in fiction, especially in something that I know is a debut novel. I think the author did a fantastic job. It's also a love story between these two boys who meet at school and who will not admit their feelings for one another, who end up going to war, and how the war changes them, how the war brings them together, and how it pulls them apart. This is a really fantastic book. It came out last year. I really loved it, and I don't talk about it a lot on here because it's really sad, and it's a little bit different from some of the fantasy sci-fi things that I usually read, but I really love this book and I would highly recommend it. Question number 11 is book that made you happy, and I'm going to choose Funny Story by Emily Henry. This is one that also made me cry, but it made me cry for happy reasons. I felt very connected to the character of Daphne in this book. I felt very seen by the author. Daphne's very prickly and hard to get to know. She doesn't trust people. She doesn't trust herself. She's had some stuff that happened in her childhood that has made it difficult for her to be herself. And really the story is about her learning that she is enough just the way that she is. And I just thought it was so moving and so touching, and it made me so happy, and it made me cry so much. So if you haven't read it, I think actually Book Lovers used to be my favorite Emily Henry, but I'm pretty sure that Funny Story is now her best book for me. All right, number 12 is most beautiful book that you've bought this year. So that is my chance to once again talk about my copy of The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. So this book, I'm gonna pull it forward a little bit, is so pretty. I love it so much. It's just such a fantastic looking book. It's also a really great book. I gave this 5 stars. It's one of my top reads of the year. I am extremely obsessed with this idea that we have books now that we are not putting dust jackets on, because I don't really like a dust jacket. I just really love this book. So this is the prettiest thing that I bought this year. I'm very excited about it, and I would recommend this to read as well. All right, and the last one is, I think I changed it a little bit to be, what goals do you have for the second half of the year? And I would like to just continue as I have been. I feel like I've been reading at a pretty good pace. I feel like I've been reading a lot of things that I have really loved, and it's been bringing a lot to my life. Things that I want to read, obviously I want to finish Stormlight Archive, the first era, this year. I am also planning to start reading Star Wars books starting next month, so that's something I'm really looking forward to. I am planning to read I'm really looking forward to reading Blood Over Bright Haven, which is being re-released in October. I do have an arc of that. I don't know if it's any different from the original book, but I'm gonna respect what the publisher says and not put a review up of that until right before the book comes out. So I am waiting until fall to read it, which is really hard because I have been so excited about that one. But yeah, other than that, just keep going as I have been. Keep making videos for my channel because I'm really enjoying the community here. And I think it's been a great 6 months so far in this year. So I hope that you all have enjoyed this. If you would like to do this tag, consider yourself tagged. It's a really fun way to look back at the first half of your year of reading. I hope you all have a great week. I will see you in the next video. Bye.